Fourth Way by P.D. Ouspensky. Chapter 15. Can a school reach a higher level than the school it started from? Answer: yes, if it works according to methods and principles of school work. It can grow. But again, you must remember that the level of the school depends on the level of the being of the people who constitute it. Question: was self-remembering a feature of the old esoteric knowledge? Answer: always, everywhere. Only sometimes, for instance, in religious schools, it's called by a different name. It's not arbitrary. Self-remembering is a necessary stage in man's development, not an arbitrarily imposed task. One has to pass through it, and one can pass through it only in one way. Question: did Christ at any time speak about it, and in what words? Answer: almost on every page in different words. For instance, watch, do not sleep. He spoke about it all the time. Question: how should one consider church religion? Answer: we cannot discuss religion because it's quite a different thing. Different elements enter into it. Every religion is based on faith, and as I have already said, faith does not enter into our system. All we can say is that religions are all on different levels. As I have explained in the first lectures, religion is a relative term. All people are divided into men of different levels, and all religions are divided in the same way. Each religion has all the degrees. This is one of the very important things to understand. We only know the horizontal divisions, historical and geographical, but there exist other divisions. There are religious ways, and religion does not contradict any other system. The difference lies in different levels. Suppose you know religion number 2. It is not sufficient if you want to study yourself and become number 4. And suppose you find that the system is on a certain level and you do not know of a religion of a sufficiently high level. Then conflict is possible. Conflict is possible only between different levels. Question: I feel that since I met this system, that I seem to understand the prayer book and the Bible better. Can it help us by giving a better understanding of the teachings of Christ? Answer: I already said that this system is not a religion. You can improve your mental machine and your capacity for understanding, and you can make your emotions better. But whether the system can help you in this direction, I cannot say. Later, you may be able to see the connection between the ideas of the system and the esoteric parts of the religion, but we do not know esoteric religion, so we cannot speak about it. A very different question was asked by Gurdjieff. A very different question was asked Mr. Gurdjieff in St. Petersburg. Someone asked in what religion this system stood in Christianity. Mr. Gurdjieff said many things about how different people understand Christianity differently. And then he said, if you like, this is esoteric Christianity. And then he added, what, from your point of view, is the most important thing in Christ's teaching? It is action. To do this, do not do that. The question is, can you do it? You must decide for yourself whether you can understand it better now or not. But you must take Christianity as a teaching of action, not as a mental teaching. If you take the Christian teaching without the modern sentimental attitude, you will see that it is the most exclusive of all religions. It is constantly repeated and repeated that only a few have a chance. Difficult way, narrow way, only a few can pass through, and so on. Question: one cannot help thinking that the Absolute is one name for God? Answer: no, you are quite wrong. The Absolute is the principle that lies in the beginning of things and behind everything. I never connected the Absolute with God in the religious sense. God in religion can do many things for you, but the Absolute can do nothing for you. So it is not God in that sense. You cannot pray to the Absolute. If you take a religious question, follow the religious explanation. If you see a difference, keep them separate. Question: is it a fact that there are higher forces that one can contact when one is in a better state? Answer: in every situation, in every question, we must keep to what we know, to what we can be sure about. And we can be sure that most of our time we are in a state in which we cannot be in contact with higher forces. Either we are fully asleep and no higher forces can penetrate to us, or we are negative so that everything that comes to us is transformed into one or another kind of negativeness. In such a state, what can we expect? Question: are there many esoteric teachings or only one? Answer: every teaching of an esoteric origin agrees fundamentally with the others. In order to be true, the teaching must be one of many. If it is unique, it means it is invented. Question: in the New Testament, we are very often told to watch and pray. What is it in the system which corresponds to prayer? Answer: whose prayer? If a machine prays, what can be the result? Which prayer? Prayer does not necessarily mean petition. Most prayers have as their aim keeping the mind on certain ideas, a form of meditation. Question: do you think that self-consciousness can be achieved by prayer? And if so, how should one pray? Answer: if one could really pray continuously, it would create self-consciousness. The whole thing is that we cannot. A man decides to pray, and 5 minutes later it becomes a mechanical repetition of words. If one could pray, prayer could do it, but one cannot because one is not man. Because one is not, man could do many things. If he was, that is. If he was permanent. As it is, one starts, another continues. Oh, okay, let me read that again. All right. Man decides to pray, and 5 minutes later it becomes a mechanical repetition of words. If one could pray, prayer could do it, but one cannot, because one is not man, could do many things if he was, that is, if he was permanent. As it is, one starts, another continues. Question: is true prayer contact with higher powers? Answer: I will not argue against it, but we know quite concretely that in ordinary centers we only have the powers that belong to them. At the same time, we learn that higher centers have many prayers. No, we learn that higher centers have many powers that ordinary centers do not have. So, I can answer in the language of the system that if this is contact, let me read this sentence again. So I can answer in the language of the system that if this contact is possible, it's only possible through higher centers. Our problem is how to approach higher centers. We cannot have contact now, but higher centers may have. Nobody can guarantee it because even our expectations may be wrong. In any case, we know, and some people have had their short experiences of it, that higher centers have new powers. So, all we can do is to try to become connected with higher centers by studying how to become conscious. When we become conscious, we shall have contact with higher centers, and then we may have new powers and new knowledge. Question: but do we not already have flashes of higher emotional center? Answer: some people do, but they are only flashes which they cannot control. Only man number 5 can control these things, and we are but man number 1, number 2, and number 3. Question: according to some esoteric teachings, the mind of man is like a pool. When it is calm, he can see things clearly and listen to the voice of the silence. Answer: there are many dangers in that. It is so easy to mix the real voice of the silence with the imaginary voice. So easy to mix the truth with imagination. It may be the way for some people, but it is not the way for us. We want to know more precisely how to evolve. So, for us, all definitions are dangerous, for there is no instrument by which we can separate the imagination in them from reality. That is what you must remember in this system, that you learn how to separate the imaginary from the real from the very beginning. When you learn to distinguish in yourself imagination from reality, then later, on higher levels of consciousness, you will be able to separate it in the objective world. Many of these mystical ways only increase confusion instead of bringing man nearer the truth. They lead him further from it. Question: then should man continually seek irritations? Answer: why irritations? You take that for granted, and then you try to find opposites. You can try all your life and get nothing if you work in the wrong way. But you must try in the right way to remember yourself, not to identify, to gain control. Nobody has enough control. We are not masters of ourselves, and this is why we cannot begin to do this and not do that. We have to study first and understand first. We must study ourselves, and sometimes we can turn one little thing and another little thing, and in this way we can begin to change. One cannot start with this big calm. One can want to be calm if one is not calm, but that is the same as speaking of such Christian principles as loving your enemies. Question: is not the ABC of all esoteric knowledge the death of the seed? Answer: we may take it like that. As a matter of fact, in connection with this, there is another thing which may perhaps explain our situation. I remember long ago, Mr. Gurdjieff said about this expression, repeated 2 or 3 times in the New Testament, that in order to germinate and produce a plant, a seed must die. That it was not complete in relation to man. In relation to man, it must be amplified. Speaking in general about the work, about the possibilities, about the direction of the work, Mr. Gurdjieff explained it to us like this. First, we must realize that we are asleep. Secondly, we must awake. When we are awake, we must die. When we die, we can be born. This is the process in detail and direction. It's useful to think about it, useful to understand what sleep means, what to awake means, what to die means, and what it would mean to be born. Suppose we want to be born. We cannot be born until we die, and we cannot die until we awake. We cannot awake until we realize that we are asleep. So, there are definite steps. Question: what does to die mean in the sense of which you speak? Answer: to die means to die, to disappear, not to be, not to exist. It is useless to die in sleep, because then you cannot be born. You must awake first. I have been asked many questions, some of them very naive by different people who have tried to understand the Lord's Prayer, who came to me asking me to explain what one or another phrase in it means. For instance, I have been asked what it means, Our Father in Heaven, what that means, who are our debtors, and what are our debts, and so on, as if the Lord's Prayer could be explained in plain words. You must understand, You must understand, first of all, that ordinary plain words cannot explain anything in relation to the Lord's Prayer. Some preparatory understanding is necessary. Then further understanding may come, but only as a result of effort and right attitude. The Lord's Prayer can be taken as an example of an insoluble problem. It has been translated into every language, learned by heart, repeated daily, yet people have not the slightest idea of what it means. This failure to understand its meaning is connected with our general inability to understand the New Testament. If you remember, in another conversation, the whole of the New Testament was given us as an example of objective art, that is to say, the work of higher mind. How then can we expect to understand with our ordinary mind what was formulated and given by higher mind? What we can do is to try and raise our mind to the level of thinking of higher mind, and although we do not realize it, this is possible in many different ways. In mathematics, for instance, we can deal with infinities, with infinity small and infinity large quantities which mean nothing to our ordinary mind, and what is possible in mathematics is possible for us if we start in the right way and continue in the right way. One of the first things which must be understood and remembered before a study of the Lord's Prayer is possible is the difference between the religious language and system language. What is religion? This word is used very often. There are people who use it every day, but they cannot define it. In the system, we have heard that religion is different for different people, that there is a religion for man number 1, a religion of man number 2, a religion of man number 3, and so on. But how can we define the difference between them? Before coming to definitions, we must understand, first of all, that the most necessary element in all religions known to us is the idea of God, a God with whom we can stand in a personal relationship, to whom we can, as it were, speak, whom we can beg for help, and in the possibility of whose help we can believe. An inseparable part of religion is faith in God, that is, in a higher being, omnipotent and omnipresent, who can help us in anything we wish for or want to do. I do not speak from the point of view of whether this is right or wrong, possible or impossible. I simply say that faith, that is, the belief in God and in His power to help you, is an essential part of religion. Prayer is also an inseparable part of any religion, but prayer can be very different. Prayer can be a petition for help in anything we may undertake. And also, through schoolwork, prayer can become help itself. It can become an instrument of work, which can be used for reviving ideas of the system, can be used for self-remembering, and for reminding us about sleep and the necessity for awakening. At the same time, the expressions of religious language cannot be translated exactly into the system language. First of all, because of the element of faith in religion, and secondly, because of the acceptance in religion and religious language of facts and assertions, which in the system are regarded as illogical and inconsistent. Nevertheless, it would be wrong to say that religion and the system are incompatible or contradictory. Only we must learn not to mix the two languages. If we begin to mix them, we shall spoil any useful conclusion that could be made on either of the two lines. Returning to the idea of God, an idea which is inseparable from religion and religious language, we must first ask ourselves how religions can be divided in a general and historical way. They may be divided into religions with one God and religions with many gods. But even in this division, it must be remembered that there is a great difference between the ordinary understanding of monotheism and polytheism and the system understanding of the same ideas. Although there are certain differences between gods, as for example in Greek mythology, in the ordinary understanding of a polytheism, all gods are more or less on the same level. From the point of view which includes the idea of different scales and different laws on different levels, one has quite a different understanding of the interdependence of gods. If we take absolute as God, we can see that it has no relation to us. The absolute is God for gods. It has relation only to the next world, that is, world 3. The world 3 is God for the next world, that is, world 6, and also for all the following worlds, but in a lesser and lesser degree. Then the galaxy, sun, planets, earth, and moon are all gods, each including in itself smaller gods. The ray of creation as a whole, taken as one triad, is also God. God the holy, God the firm, God the immortal. So we may choose on which level we want to take our God if we want to use the word God in the religious sense, that is to say, in the sense of God having immediate access to our lives. Free from the system point of view, we have nothing to prove that any of these worlds may have a personal relation to us, but there is a place for God in the system. In the lateral octave, which begins in the sun, there are two quite unknown powers. There are two quite unknown points, about which we have no material for thinking. The octave begins as do in the sun, then passes as do, as in like do, re, mi. Okay, the octave begins as do in the sun, then passes on to si on the level of planets. On earth it becomes la, sol, fa, which constitutes organic life, including man. When each individual being in the human, animal, and vegetable kingdoms dies, The body, or what remains of the body, goes to the earth and becomes part of the earth, and the soul goes to the moon, becomes part of the moon. From this we can understand mi and re. But about si and do we know nothing at all. These two notes may give rise to many suppositions as to the possible place of a god or gods having some relation to us in the ray of creation. Now, remembering all that has just been said, we may come to the study of the Lord's Prayer. The first thing is to discover why and when it was given. We know that it was given to replace many useless prayers. The next thing is to note many interesting features in the Lord's Prayer itself and in its very special construction. And from our understanding of this construction, and particularly from our knowledge of the law of three, we may be able to realize from the system point of view there is a possibility of the development of understanding through our understanding of the Lord's Prayer. Like many mathematical problems, the study of the Lord's Prayer must begin with a correct disposition or arrangement of the separate parts of the problem. We notice at once two interesting things. First, that the Lord's Prayer is divided into 3 times 3. The second, that is, the Lord's Prayer, and second, that in the Lord's Prayer there are certain key words, that is to say, words which explain other words to which they refer. We cannot call the division into the 3 times 3 triads because we do not know their relations to one another, and we cannot see the forces. We can only see that there are 3 parts. If you read the first 3 petitions together as one part, you will see many things which you cannot see if you read them in the ordinary way. 1. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. 2. Thy kingdom come. 3. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In the first petition, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, the immediate question is, who is our Father? And the key word is heaven. What does in heaven mean? If we try to answer this question from the point of view of the ray of creation, we may be able to understand something. If we live on earth, so heaven must mean higher levels. That is, the planets, the sun, or the galaxy. The idea of heaven presupposes certain forces and certain mind or minds on those higher levels to which, in some way, the Lord's Prayer advises us to appeal. Heaven cannot refer to anything on the level of the earth. But if we realize that the cosmic forces connected with the galaxy, the sun, or the planets are too big to have any relation to us, then we can look for a place of our Father in heaven in the do or si of the lateral octave. Or we can again leave it to higher regions. In other words, which follows, there is nothing personal. Hallowed be thy name is the expression of a desire for the development of the right attitude towards God and for a better understanding of the idea of God or higher mind. And this desire for development obviously refers to the whole of humanity. The second petition, Thy kingdom come, is the expression of a desire for the growth of esotericism. In A New Model of the Universe, I tried to explain that the kingdom of heaven could only mean esotericism. That is to say, a certain inner part of humanity. Oh! Sorry, that's an alarm. Okay, I'm going to pause here and continue next time. Sorry about that. Hope that didn't jar you too much.